So here's the problem. Key error means it couldn't find a piece of data. This is a really interesting thing. It just so happens that this happened here. Sometimes you won't see this until you're like spend a day running a script and all of a sudden it'll error out. This is what happens with messy data, because there's nothing that guarantees that in this database of Weibo, everything is super well structured. Sometimes there might be data missing. But because Python is very explicit, if you tell Python to get something and it can't get it, it's not just going to move past it. It's going to give you an error that says, I can't find this. So there's a series of statements, and I think this is the last thing we'll do, and then we'll go on to our reading discussion, which are super useful, but you should use them very carefully because it makes troubleshooting harder. And this is a statement which, it's called a try except statement, and it will basically try something. If it fails, if it errors out, if it gives you one of these errors, it has you can input code that it will run once that thing fails. It will basically just skip over that failure and move on with the code. This is really useful if you're dealing with messy data sets, particularly when we get into web scraping. We're going to do this a lot because we don't want it to just stop the whole script if it fails on one data point. At the same time, you should use it carefully because it's really hard to troubleshoot. Because basically, if there's any error in that piece of code, it will just skip over it. It will never tell you there's an error. So if you do have some kind of structural problems with your script, it'll be really hard to figure out why those things are happening. Okay. So the way to do this is it's really intuitive. You do try. This is the piece of code we had problems with, right? When you have an error in Python, it will show you the line where it had a problem. So here it was looking for user and says can't find user. This piece of code, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to wrap that piece of code in the try command, or try function, right? So what this tells Python is, okay, try to do this. If this happens, great. If not, there's an error, and those are called exceptions in Python. And whatever is in this piece of code will run if that error happens. And then it will just go past and move on with the script. It won't exit your script, okay? So the way this works is it'll try this. If it works, it'll skip the except. If it tries this and there's an exception, there's an error, it will run this and then move on. So typically what we want to put in the except is some kind of feedback to us to know that there's an error. And if it's an okay error, like it couldn't find the data, fine, move on. If it's something else, then we have to go and troubleshoot our script. So here I'm just going to print user ID error. All right, and it's just not going to store. And sometimes I'll also do like UID equals an empty string, right? Because you want something in that data, and usually we'll just put in an empty string. So when we get that data, it'll just be an empty line, which is fine, right? Because we're dealing with messy data sets. If we're getting a million users, we don't care if a few of them are missing, right? But we definitely don't want our script to stop because of that. All right, and that we'll see a lot. We'll see next week again. So we're gonna deal with it more then. Okay, so now I'll run this. There's page 1. Page 2. See, there's some errors here, and that's it. So now, just through those couple of loops, we've actually were able to get all the IDs of everyone that checked into that location.